Hey, welcome back to Stella Talks. I'm Stella Brooks, and today I need to tell you about a city that is quietly falling apart, while the mayor in charge is laughing on camera about it. Seattle, one of the most iconic cities in America, home of Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, the city that basically invented the modern tech economy. And right now in 2026, it is hemorrhaging jobs, hemorrhaging people, hemorrhaging money. And the woman sitting in the mayor's office, she just waved goodbye to millionaires leaving the city and said, and I am not making this up, bye. That's what's happening in Seattle. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly how a city goes from boom to breakdown and who gets left holding the bill. Before we get into it, what do you think? Is your city showing the same warning signs Seattle is right now? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because Stella Talks exists for exactly this kind of story. Let's set the scene. Seattle elected Katie Wilson as mayor in late 2025. She is a self-described Democratic socialist who ran on taxing the rich, taxing big business, and closing the city's mounting structural deficit through what she calls progressive revenue options. Sound familiar? It should, because we've seen this movie before. The difference is that Seattle is not starting from a stable place. It is starting from a city already under enormous financial and economic stress, and the policies now being layered on top are accelerating the collapse rather than stopping it. Seattle has struggled financially since 2020. The city extended pandemic-era emergency programs, labor costs rose sharply, and sales and property tax revenues fell. That left the city with annual shortfalls consistently surpassing $100 million. In the last 10 years, Seattle's population grew 19%, while inflation drove costs up 44%. The math has never added up. And now the bill is coming due, all at once. Seattle is now facing a near $500 million budget deficit over the next 3 years. Projections that exceed former Mayor Bruce Harrell's estimates by more than $100 million. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural crisis. Mayor Wilson herself admitted during a Seattle Channel interview, I don't see any scenario where we're able to come up with $175 million of new revenue this year. So I think we are also looking at some scale of cuts. Her budget director confirmed that cuts could include layoffs of city workers, one of the city's largest expenditures. So what is Wilson's plan to fix a $500 million hole? More taxes. She told a community forum her administration is exploring a capital gains tax and said she would be very interested in an income tax on Seattle residents if it were legally allowed. Under state law, it is not. That's right, the mayor's primary solution to the budget crisis is a tax she legally cannot impose. Her administration is now exploring a proposal to create a special fire district, moving a significant portion of Seattle Fire Department's $350 million budget out of the city's general fund entirely, circumventing the state's property tax cap by creating a new taxing entity that could levy additional charges on property owners. In other words, when you run out of ways to tax people through the front door, you build a new door. And here is where the rumors get truly unsettling. Multiple sources close to City Hall, unconfirmed but circulating persistently among city budget analysts and council staffers, say Wilson's inner circle has privately acknowledged the deficit projections are still being understated in public-facing documents, that the real 3-year gap, when pension obligations and deferred infrastructure costs are fully accounted for, is significantly larger than the numbers currently being presented to Seattle residents. Nobody is putting that in a press release, but the people who build these budgets for a living are talking. And what they're saying does not match what's coming out of the mayor's office. When Wilson's budget director was pressed on whether anything could actually be cut, she responded, all of these dollars matter to someone. It's delivering a service. It's providing access to a class, that sort of thing that matters to someone. Nearly double the budget in 10 years, and every single dollar is sacred. If no dollar can ever be reduced, the only answer is always more revenue. And more revenue in Seattle's current environment means more taxes on a private sector that is already walking out the door. Now let's talk about what is actually happening to Seattle's economic engine. Because this is the context Wilson never mentions when she talks about taxing big business. The Seattle metropolitan area bore the heaviest impact of tech layoffs in Q1 2026. Approximately 16,590 tech workers affected by Amazon and Microsoft alone. That is not a number from a recession. That is a number from a city in the middle of a full economic restructuring, and it happened in a single quarter. Meta cut nearly 1,400 jobs in Washington state just this week, 20% of its entire local workforce. The company employed roughly 7,000 people in the Seattle region before the cuts. Oracle laid off 491 Seattle area workers. Starbucks announced it is moving its headquarters to Nashville. And Washington Democrats simultaneously enacted a new 9.9% state income tax. The tech sector announced more than 18,700 job cuts in March alone, totaling over 52,000 for the year so far. That is the most for the first 3 months of any year since 2023. And Wilson's response to all of this? When asked about millionaires leaving Seattle over progressive tax policies, she laughed, literally laughed, and waved goodbye. That moment is going to define her administration, because here is the economic reality she is laughing off. Seattle's Jumpstart payroll tax already charges businesses up to 2.4% on employees earning over $150,000. The city also levies a business and occupation tax. And beginning in 2026, businesses with employees making over $1 million face an additional 5% tax on salaries above that level. And Wilson wants to add more on top of all of that to businesses that are already cutting thousands of jobs in a city that is already hemorrhaging high-earning taxpayers. Word circulating among Seattle's business community right now, unconfirmed but coming from multiple independent sources, is that at least 2 mid-sized tech firms with Seattle operations have quietly begun drafting relocation feasibility studies for Austin and Miami. Not announced, not leaked to the press, just quietly underway. Because when a mayor laughs at the people who fund her city's budget while simultaneously proposing to tax them further, you start making contingency plans. This is the part of the story that gets buried under the budget numbers and the political back and forth. This is what it actually feels like to live in Seattle right now. Seattle's housing market is going through what analysts are calling a historic inventory shock. There are now 8,630 listings across the Seattle metro as of April 2026. In a normal April, there are only 4,600. Inventory today is 88% above normal. Think about what that means for a family that bought a home in Seattle 2 or 3 years ago at peak prices. The buyers have disappeared. The layoffs gutted the pool of high-income renters and buyers who kept the market propped up. And the homes are sitting. Housing analyst Nick Gurley put it plainly. This is happening due to layoffs, a historic lack of affordability, and increased outbound migration. Active listings in Washington state surged 29.3% year over year in March 2026, while closed sales barely moved, rising just 0.2%. The median sales price fell 1.5% year over year to $640,000. Homes are worth less, they're harder to sell, and the people who need to sell because they lost a job, because they can't afford the mortgage on one income, because they're moving to find work somewhere else, are doing so into a market that has fundamentally shifted beneath them. And here's what nobody is connecting loudly enough. The small business owners around Amazon's Seattle campus, the coffee shops, the dry cleaners, the lunch spots that built their entire business model around thousands of well-paid tech workers showing up 5 days a week. The geographic concentration of these layoffs is creating localized economic pressure with ripple effects across housing markets, commercial real estate, and local businesses. When 16,000 tech workers lose their jobs in 1 quarter, it is not just 16,000 families in crisis. It is every vendor, every landlord, every small business in that orbit feeling the withdrawal. And the city's answer? More taxes on the employers who are still here, more fees on property owners, a new fire district levy that hits every homeowner, lands on top of all of that. On families already stretched, on small business owners already watching their customer base thin out, on renters in a market where average rents are already over $4,000 a month, with a record low vacancy rate of around 1.4%. These are not abstractions. These are real people sitting at kitchen tables in Seattle right now, doing math that doesn't work. And the mayor is on TV laughing. Wilson's revised deficit projections show $175 million needed in 2027, $164 million in 2028, and $149 million in 2029, a total gap of nearly $500 million over 3 years. And that's the official number, with the private whispers suggesting it could be higher. The options on the table: more taxes, a new fire district levy, department cuts that could include city worker layoffs. None of them solve the structural problem. They are Band-Aids on a city that is losing the economic base that funded everything. And every new tax on business or high earners accelerates exactly the departure that is causing the revenue problem in the first place. Seattle's City Budget Office director says all options are on the table. That deficit could grow to more than $300 million by 2029. And if the tech exodus accelerates, if more companies follow Starbucks to Nashville, if more layoffs hit the region, if the housing inventory shock deepens, those projections will look optimistic within 18 months. Seattle is not a city that failed suddenly. It is a city where decades of spending without ceilings, policies without economic consequences, and leadership without accountability are all arriving at the same moment. And the people of Seattle, the ones who stayed, who built their lives there, who cannot afford to just pick up and move to Austin, they will pay for every single decision that led to this point. So here's where Stella lands on this. Seattle is not a weather event. It is not bad luck. It is a case study in what happens when a government keeps spending beyond its means, taxes the engine that funds everything, and then laughs when that engine starts leaving. If your city's mayor is making the same moves, pushing new taxes on businesses already under pressure, refusing to cut spending, dismissing the people and companies that fund the budget, bookmark this video. Because Seattle is showing you exactly where that road ends. Is your city heading in the same direction? What's happening on the ground where you live? I genuinely want to know. Drop it in the comments. Let's build this conversation together. And if this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Every week on Stella Talks, we follow the money governments hope you don't follow. I'll see you in the next one.